What's a redirect normally? Let me see the function signature. So it wants the W, the R, and then the URL to go to. Oh, and so the URL, it's just adding in the year 00 when it sends it there as a URL.
Yeah, and so that
parameter.
the URL it redirects them to is this login OAuth authorize, which is the URL here off the URL.
The 000 gets passed in the URL.
And so it passes in the client ID and yeah, the state 0000.
The client ID comes, oh, that's you.
Yep, so that's, yeah, that client ID is from
Got
here.
It. Got it.
And it says response type code because we're using the authorization code flow.
Okay. Well, I think that we can leave that little Q&A in. That was kind of quiet, but I think that was useful. And so go back to the code there just for 1 second. And it is...
So the client ID there and the state there both go into the URL.
Yep.
And the route is just this auth URL from the endpoint.
And so that's redirect, get config, auth code URL. And so auth code URL just takes in, let me see the signature of that. Auth code URL takes in the state.
Yep.
And the state is whatever number you're giving it, or ID with this login attempt.
Yep.
And then it creates that redirect URL, which you use in the redirect.
Yep.
Okay, cool. What's up with this video? What are we doing?
All right, so the next video was should be finishing it once the users hit the approve and it drops them back here.
Okay. Let's see it. Fuzz good.
That was a
finishing. My fingers were off by one hair.
I think you got finished off by whoever you're trying to punch out.
Finishing the auth process.
All right. All right. So the users get redirected back to the URL that you told the website here, or was in your. It's either there or in your config here. Some websites require you to have it in that config as well. Some of them do not. So GitHub said specifically that that's optional. If left out, it'll be the callback URL. It provided it's got some restrictions too.
Say that part all again.
So GitHub specifically says
before that though, how do we get to the redirect? Redirect URL is the one that we're redirecting to, right? In that previous video.
So that's yeah. So no, we redirect to GitHub. GitHub redirects back to us. And so this is where they'll redirect back to us.
Okay, and then there's restrictions on where they redirect back to us.
So the redirect URI says if you skip it, it's exactly what you put in there. If you do provide it, the URL host and port must match what you gave here.
Okay, got it.
So since we just want to go to there, that's all we need.
Yeah. And if we left that out, it would go to this endpoint that we coded.
So yeah, they said it was optional. So and they said if we skip it, it just goes to this URL that we provided.
Okay.
And so we skipped that in our config.
Oh, got it.
So since that's the URL that we're going back to is OAuth2 receive.
Let's create that route.
Oops. http.handlefunc. Complete GitHub OAuth. And so complete GitHub OAuth. All right, so the user gets redirected back here, and they will have the code and the state in the query parameters. So we can get those with request.form value, code, state. So for our particular purposes, our state should always be this string here. So just to confirm, I'm going to check if state is not equal to that.
And if we had a map or something, we check to see if it's in the map and if it hasn't timed out.
Yeah. So, and I'm just going to print an error message onto their browser if there is a problem. State is incorrect. php.status bad request. return. Right. So if the state's not what we expected, throw an error. That's someone trying to hack this endpoint, or timed out, or something. But make sure your states are correct. So now we've got the code, and so we've got our GitHub OAuth config dot exchange, takes in a context and the code and some options. So for the context, we can call request has a function that gives you a context for a request. So there's our context and there's our code. And so this gives back a token. And an error. HTTP.error couldn't exchange or couldn't log in. HTTP.status internal server error. Return.
Dude, I like how you start typing stain. Did you notice that? Is it like STAI and you're like, boom, STAIN?
Yeah, my editor just makes sure, you just want to make sure your letters are in the right order.
Sequence. Yeah.
So I typed status internal server error so often that...
That was cool. So for 99.9% of the people in the world, I could use a computer faster than them. You're that 1%. You use a computer faster than me. It's like, whoa.
All right, so once we got the token, now we can do GitHub OAuth config dot token source, and this also takes in a context, and it takes in the token, and this gives back the token source. And then you can use the OAuth 2 package has new client, and this also takes a context and your token source, and it gives you an HTTP client.
Okay, so we do the GitHub OAuth config exchange. So we do the exchange. I'm just looking at our notes here on my computer.
Yep.
And then once we have the exchange there, I'm looking back to your computer.
We got a token.
We get a token. Converts code into a token, and then we do the token source. And token source gives us
a token source, which in the OAuth package, a token source is anything that's got this interface that gives a token. It's an interface that just gives a token.
Okay.
So once we have the token source, then we can call OAuth 2 new client and give it the token source, and it'll give us an HTTP client.
Okay.
And now we are authenticated with GitHub. We can now make calls to GitHub on behalf of our user. And so this is actually enough, I think, for this video. In the next video, we'll show how to actually turn that into an actual login.
Getting the HTTP client is a good name for this video. We name everything after the fact. Our courses, our videos. Let's push it.
All right.
Tag V35. And in this one, I'll copy down what we did here. Was all this stuff. Previous one was auth code URL, and this one was all that stuff.
Keep forgetting the -n. So yeah, getting the authenticated HTTP client. Because this particular HTTP client is authenticated with GitHub. Any request you make to GitHub with this client will be using that OAuth connection. V0350.
Would the right word be this client is authenticated with the OAuth provider, GitHub's the OAuth provider? Or
yeah.
What would be that's the okay terminology to say who's providing it?
Yeah, it's the resource provider. GitHub's providing a resource. And so so according to the OAuth documentation and such, they call it the resource provider.
Yeah. I'll add that in. All right, it's kind of making sense. If you get a client that's authenticated, you could go with the resource provider. You could go do stuff for that individual at your site at the resource provider. All right, awesome. And we're going to do using the HTTP client in this next video, right?
Yep.
Though this might not be the name of the video. Using the HTTP client. All right, see you in the next video.